I am so proud of y'all for being here on time change. What you do as a pastor, you always get the most adult content message you can and put it on time change. People are like, I got to go hear what he's about to say. Because we're about to tell you something and read something to you that you probably have never, ever, ever, ever either read or heard in church before, because this story that we're going to share with you, I guarantee you 95% of all pastors just skip over it. You'll never see this story in on a flannel graph in the kids area, because when we read it, you're going to be like, is that really in the, you're going to ask, Jason, is that really in the Bible? And I'm going to tell you it really is in the Bible. So I have to give a disclaimer out. This is a rated R message for real. You ever looked at your family and go, that my family's messed up? I'm not talking about your kids. I'm just talking about your family in general. You ever grow up, leave the house, think your family's strange, you leave the house, you come back, and you're like, my family's not as strange as I thought they were? That happened to me. We're going to tell you a story, a real story, and it's kind of, I'm just going to give you the text, and don't read it yet. Don't jump ahead of me, but Genesis 37 is where we're going to be. Genesis 37 is a story of a guy named Judah. Judah is one of the sons of Jacob. Judah, let me just give you a background real quick. Judah was the guy the brother that was standing around Joseph when they said, let's not kill him, let's sell him. We can make some money off of. He goes, let's not commit murder, let's commit human trafficking instead. I mean, that's really what he said. So he was the one that stood up, and he listen, and don't. This is called the Lion of Judah. He is from this family. This is Jesus' family. Sweet little Jesus. Heals people. Loving on people. Lived a sinless life. This is his family. These are his people. I had a picture in my head of this woman named Tamar. And I've read the story, I knew the story, but I've never preached the story, so you're the first group that's actually going to hear me preach this message. And when I went back and read it and read it and read it and studied it and studied it and studied it, I walked away with more of a sense of respect for this woman. Think about this. If you were living now and God said, I'm going to write your life, and God took the most messed up, jacked up part of your life and said, not only are we going to put it in a newspaper, we're going to put it in my word. So generation after generation after generation after generation, they're going to read about the worst part of your life. Thank you, Jesus. Right? This is what happened to this woman. It's crazy. Matter of fact, let me just tell you this. There are 5 women that are listed in the genealogy of Jesus. I don't know if you knew this or not. Let me give you the text real quick, and then you can write this down if you want. Matthew chapter number 1, verses 2 and 3. You know this genealogy of Jesus. Abraham was the father of Isaac. Isaac was the father of Jacob. Jacob was the father of Judah and his brothers. And Judah was the father of, it's Perez, but since we live in Florida and we have a lot of Puerto Rican people in the house, we're going to call him Perez. His mother was Tamar. Tamar's listed in the genealogy of Jesus. So you have Mary. Can you imagine this weird flex? So they're all sitting around having tea, these ladies. Think about it. It's a very exclusive club. You can only come to this tea session if you are in the genealogy of Jesus. So Mary goes, well, I am his mother. And Jesus is my son. Joseph's not the daddy. Right? Well, so then Bathsheba's like, well, you know what? I'm also in the genealogy of Jesus. And all I was doing one day was minding my own business, taking a bath. And then the king approached me. And then you got this lady named Ruth. She's like, well, I was a widow. My husband died. And so what I did was I was just working with my mother-in-law, and I told her that your people will be my people. So I'm working the fields, and all of a sudden this guy named Boaz is like, what up, girl? And then we fell in love, and I'm actually, King David came through me. And this lady named Rahab, the harlot. She's like, well, I used to be a harlot, and I lived on top of the walls of Jericho. And you know what? And God changed my life. And I no longer became a harlot. I became a follower of the Lord. That's amazing. What about you, Tamar? Well, it's funny you should say how I got here. I had one husband, he died. Had a second husband, he died. And we'll get into that later. And then I had to con my father-in-law into sleeping with me so I could have a baby, so that's why I'm here. That would be a weird flex, right? Weird flex meaning that you with me on this so far? So they're all sitting around, why are you in the genealogy of Jesus? And this is where their stories are. So here we have Genesis chapter number 37. 37, let me give you 37, then we'll go to 38. 37 is the story of Joseph. This is what I just told you. Joseph, remember the coat of many colors, the apple of his father's eye. He's the one that had these dreams. He's the one that his daddy loved. And so he goes out to check on his brothers. His brothers get all ticked off at him. They make it look like he was killed by a lion or a bear. And then they take the coat back to the dad. Dad starts crying, weeping. But in reality, they basically shipped their brother off into slavery. Sold him out. And so there you have the story. And then the next story is Genesis 38. And there's only one chapter because it goes 37 Joseph, 38 this story, and then back to 39, you go back to the story of Joseph. So it's almost like it's sandwiched in between this life of Joseph. It's almost like like God was writing the text, and then he's like, well, let me just put this story in there. But once you read the story and you understand the story, you understand that God didn't put it in there by mistake. It's actually in there on purpose. So let me give you some contrast. So what God is showing you and because Moses wrote the first 5 books of the Bible, let me tell you what the contrast is. Let me give you the contrast before we dig into the story. Judah is Genesis 38. He was associated with foreign women. Joseph is 39. He's had a separation from foreign women. Remember, because his next story is he gets sold to who? Potiphar. Right? He goes into Potiphar's house. He's a godly man. He loves the Lord. He's a man of principle. Right? And then that woman, she don't even get a name. That's Potiphar's wife. Starts to seduce him, right? You know the story. And then he rejects her over and over and over and over again. Then she has enough. And then maybe she's like, you know what? I'm going to trap him. So she goes and I can't take it no more. And she throws herself on Joseph. He runs away. She grabs his coat. Then later, because of her humiliation probably, and her pride was being bruised, she goes, you know what? He raped me. You know the story. So let me give you the contrast. So Judah was associated with foreign women, whereas Joseph had a separation from foreign women. Judah had sexual immorality, whereas Joseph had sexual morality. Judah was the victimizer, whereas Joseph was victimized. Judah had the judgment of God on his life, whereas Joseph had the blessings of God. Judah had a true accusation against him, where Joseph had a false accusation against him. Judah had a confession of sin, and then Joseph had a rejection of sin. Let me give you the text. Here we go. We're going to get into the story. And let me just say this to you. I have wrestled all week long what I was going to share, what I was not going to share. So I'm just going to tell you this. We're going to read the word. You guys okay with that? We're just going to let the word fall where it is. You might have to, got some little kids in here. They might need to ask questions, and that's your job, not mine. Here we go. All right, Genesis 38, here it is. I'm telling you, you probably have never even heard this story. Here it is. About this time. Now, what it doesn't tell you is in verse 1. I got to set you up. In this translation that I am reading to you, you have to understand that it says about this time, Judah left home. He actually left, the Bible says that he actually left his brothers. It wasn't like he just traveled one day. It's like he was hanging out with all of his brothers and the family, and then one day he says, you know what? I'm not going to be here anymore. I'm leaving, and I'm going to Canaanite. I'm gonna go to a different area where they worship a different God. And he's not just leaving his family, he's almost in a sense turning his back on the Lord as well. That's kind of how it's written. At this time, Judah left home and he moved to Adullam, where he stayed with a man named Hira. So he has this is like a business associate. There he saw a Canaanite woman. By the way, Canaanite, I was doing some research and I was messing with Karen. The Canaanites, modern day, check this out. So who are the Canaanites and where are they from? Canaanites, you ready for this? They're Lebanese. 93% of my people. All right, if you want to call it that, but 93% of all the people that live in Lebanon. It's amazing. That's where the Canaanites eventually settled in the area, and that's where they're at today. Just so you know, probably don't care about that, but I thought it was kind of cool. Here we go. Okay, so there he saw a Canaanite woman, a daughter of Shua, and he married her. Was he supposed to marry a Canaanite? No. Say it with me. No. Very good. All right. When he slept with her, she became pregnant and gave birth to a son and named the boy Ur. Then she became pregnant again. I just got to skip over that. You know, there's so many things that popped in my head right now, and I'm like, control. Okay, here we go. And then she became pregnant again, and she gave birth to another son and named him Onan. Great names. And at the time of Sheila's birth, they were living in Kezib. In the course of time, in other words, time has passed. In the course of time, Judah arranged for his firstborn son, Ur, to marry a woman named Tamar. But Ur was a wicked man in the Lord's sight, and so the Lord took his life. Then Judah said to Ur's brother Onan, "Go and marry Tamar, as our law requires of the brother of a man who has died. You must produce an heir for your brother." Now, let me just kind of set you up. I don't know about you, but I'm reading the text. I'm going, what did he do that was so evil? Why did God kill Ur? Was it his name? Right? So I did some research, and according to Jewish tradition, okay, there's two possibilities of why they think God killed Ur. The first one is this, is that the Bible says that he actually picked the wife for his son, and it wasn't the woman that he wanted to marry, so he refused to sleep with her, therefore caused great anger among the Lord. But you got to remember that, let's put this in context. Remember, God told Abraham, God told Isaac, God told Jacob, I'm going to make you a great nation. You're going to produce offspring. So with the grandson here, or the great-grandson here, who refuses to have children, that makes total sense, right? Another thought is the fact that he wanted to sleep, he slept with her, but he refused to have children with her because he didn't want her to lose her lady figure. Okay? That's the thought. I don't know if those are true or not, but that's where my mind went. I was like, okay, well, that's all right. So before we kind of get all weirded out, this custom he's talking about was to help women fight against poverty and abuse. So if your husband died, you didn't have an heir to carry on the lineage and to carry. Remember, the women could not get what was belonging to the family. Then it was either sold or passed out, or people just took it. So it was actually a way by which women could stay in the family, keep everything, to be able to keep passing on from generation to generation. So it's actually, at this time, a great law to be able to protect. As a matter of fact, Moses even puts it in the Mosaic law. So it was not just a custom before the law. It became, something that God said, okay, we're going to carry this tradition through. So here we go, verse 9. It says, but Onan, the second brother number 2, was not willing to have a child who would not be his own heir. So he's like, I'm not going to give this woman a child and it not be my kid, basically. So whenever he had intercourse with his brother's wife, he spilled his semen on the ground, And this prevented her from having a child who would belong to his brother. But the Lord considered it evil for Onan to deny a child to his dead brother, so the Lord took Onan's life too. Just look at your neighbor and say, rated R for real. Then Judah said to Tamar, his daughter-in-law. So then the father-in-law goes to the daughter-in-law. He says, go back to your parents' home and remain a widow until my son Shelah is old enough to marry you. So now she goes from losing husband number one to baby daddy number two to now she becomes a cougar in waiting. Am I reading that right? I mean, am I just being honest? He said, go home, drink your mimosa, wear your leopard print, and we'll see you in a few years. She's like, I got this. I don't even know what that was, but we did it. So Tamar went back to live in her father's home. Now think about this. Okay, just stop for a minute. Be real. So what is going through this poor woman's mind? You ready? Husband number one, bad name, bad man, dead. Right? Husband number two, dead, selfish. So she slept with two men in her life, and both of them are dead. Yay! Put that on your profile. Potential husband number three, too young. I'll wait. So it says that basically, in parentheses, I didn't read it, but I'll read it in verse 11. It says, but Judah didn't really intend to do this because he was afraid that Shelah would die too. You think? I mean, let's be honest. I mean, if you're in a baseball game and you're already 0 for 2, do you want to take the chance with your third son? So here we go. You ready? So here's the con that got played out. Genesis 38, verse number 12 says, some years later, Judah's wife died. So we're not talking about the next day. We're talking about time has passed. People have lived or living their lives. So Judah's wife passed away. And it says this, after the time of mourning was over, Judah and his friend Hira, the Aldamite, went to Timnah to supervise the shearing of his sheep. So evidently he's become quite the shepherd. Someone told Tamar, look, your father-in-law is going to Timnah to shear his sheep. And Tamar was aware that Shelah had grown up. So the son that she was waiting for has already grown up, but no arrangements have been made for her to come and marry him. So she changed out of her widow's clothing and covered herself with a veil to disguise herself. Then she sat beside the road at the entrance of the village of Enam, which is on the road to Timnah. Judah noticed her and thought that she was a prostitute, since she had her face covered. So he stopped and propositioned her. Great guy. He says, let me have sex with you, he said, not realizing that she was his own daughter-in-law. How much will you pay to have sex with me? That's a great question. Now we're negotiating. Tamar asked. I will send you a young goat. Sorry. I will send you a young goat from my flock, Judah promised. But what will you give me to guarantee that you will send me the goat? And it says this, she asked. What kind of guarantee do you want? He replied. So she answered, leave me your identification seal and its cord and the walking stick you are carrying. So Judah gave them to her. Clothing as usual. You see this? Later, Judah asked his friend Hira the Aldamite to take the young goat to the woman and to pick up the things that he had given her as his guarantee, but Hira couldn't find her. So he asked the men who lived there, where can I find the shrine prostitute who was sitting beside the road at the entrance to Enam? We've never had a shrine prostitute here, they replied. So Hiram returned to Judah and told him, I couldn't find her anywhere, and the men of the village claimed that they'd never had a shrine prostitute there. Then let her keep the things I gave her, Judah said. I sent the young goat as we agreed, but you couldn't find her. We will be the laughing stock of the village if we went back to look for her, or went back again to look for her. I'm thinking to myself, buddy, that's not what people are laughing at you about. I'm just saying. All right, here we go, verse 24. And now because of this, she's pregnant. Bring her out and let her be burned. Don't you just love the grace in the Old Testament? Judah demanded. But as they were taking her out to kill her, she sent this message to her father-in-law. The man who owns these things made me pregnant. Look closely. Whose seal and cord and walking stick are these? Verse 26. Judah recognized them immediately and said, she is more righteous than I am, because I didn't arrange for her to marry my son Shelah. And Judah never slept with Tamar again. Let's close it out here. It is verse 27. It says, then the time came when Tamar to give birth, and it was discovered that she was carrying twins. While she was in labor, one of the babies reached out his hand, and the midwife grabbed it and tied a scarlet string around the child's wrist, announcing this one came out first. But then he pulled back his hand and came out, and out came his brother. What? The wife explained. How did you break out first? So she named the first one Perez, and the baby with the scarlet string on his wrist was born, and he was named Zirah. Let me give you some application points of this story, because it sounds like a crazy story. Why would it be here? Why in the world would God put this crazy story with this poor woman's, her whole life is out there? I didn't tell you this at the beginning, but I want to tell you the whole point of what we're trying to make today is this. Just go back and read it as I have it written. Your past mistakes never define your legacy. I don't think you got a hold of that one. Your past mistakes never define your legacy or your future. See, when I was a kid, I grew up in a church where they told me there was two kinds of wills. There was God's perfect will for my life. Listen, there was God's perfect will for my life, and then there was God's permissive will for my life. God's perfect will was when I did everything I was supposed to do, and I was a good little Christian boy, and I did all the right things, and I went to church, and I got the stars by my name, and I memorized my Bible, and I could sing all the songs, and I would be in God's perfect will. But if I screwed up and I was a bad boy, then there was this thing called God's permissive will, where God says, okay, you weren't perfect, but we're going to go ahead and give you, some blessing, but it won't be as much as it was before. Let me tell you something. Have you guys ever heard that? Am I the only one that's ever been taught that? Okay, who's never heard that before? Bless your hearts. Praise Jesus for that. Because that is such a lie. There's only one kind of will, and it's God's will. So when you screw up in life, or you make bad choices, or you find yourself sitting on the side of the road like a prostitute, wanting not to grow up and be abused by people, and you're trying to take things into your own hands, realize this, that God's not up there going, oh, you made a mistake, I got to change plans. Because if that becomes your theology, listen, if that becomes your theology, then what you're saying is that God is not in control of your life. We call this the sovereignty of God. This means that God does whatever he chooses to do because he's God. And if that's really true, and we believe that to be true, the Bible teaches that to be true. So when we live our lives and we seek God, nothing that we do, whether it's good or bad, surprises the Lord. So your past mistakes in your life do not dictate your future. Your future is in the hands of the Lord. He's the one that controls your future. Your mistakes are not bigger than his love for you. You just learned theology just right now. How amazing. That's incredible. The sovereignty of God is so strong in our lives that no matter how crazy the story is, no matter how crazy my life is, God says, Tamar, I'm sorry, I can't use you to be in the lineage of my son Jesus because you played the prostitute. Did he say that? Let me give you some points real quick. You ready? Don't mistake partial obedience with obedience. And you have to learn this because as a Christian, God is going to call us to be completely obedient to him. And just because you do a little bit of it doesn't mean it's obedience. Just because Onan slept with Tamar doesn't mean that he was obedient in his calling as a brother to his brother's wife. That rule was set up to protect her. He did not protect her. He was selfish and self-centered. And all he cared about was his things. All he cared about was what he owned. He could care less about Tamar, and he sure as heck didn't care about his brother. So never, ever, ever misunderstand partial obedience has nothing to do with complete obedience. When God calls us, he wants us to be completely obedient. You can justify your partial obedience all you want, but God's saying, I'm waiting to bless you. I just need you to be obedient. Make sense what I'm saying? Look at you. Listen, if you're in a car and you're driving and you run a red light and a police officer pulls you over and he says, you ran the red light, you go, yeah, but I'm wearing my seatbelt. I mean, I got in my car, I sat down, I strapped myself in because that's the law. He's like, yeah, the law is also to stop at a red light. Do you get a ticket? Partial obedience is not the same as obedience. You with me? Just say amen. All right, so point number 2, here we go. I love point number 2 because this is beautiful. Don't be so quick to point out other people's sins. Oh, snap. I love it when people point out my sins because I think to myself, what are you covering up? When someone points out to you your wrongs, you just step back and go, I wonder what they're trying to cover up. I wonder what it is they're trying to deflect. Let me put it to you this way. Luke says it this way. Jesus says it in chapter 6. And why worry about the speck in your friend's eye when you have a log in your own? How can you think of saying, friend, let me help you get rid of that speck in your eye when you can't see past the log in your own eye? He goes, hypocrite. First, get rid of the log in your own eye, then you will see well enough to deal with the speck in your friend's eye. I love this because who are we to judge somebody else? Who are we to sit there and go, Tamar, how could you? You should have just went home and hung out with your family. Think about the scarlet letter that she kind of had, like, I am cursed. Nobody wants to be with me. I didn't do anything other than I'm raised in this society. And I got caught up in this crazy family like it's my fault. So listen to this one. So don't be so quick to point out other people's sins. Number 3, don't forget the promises you make to other people. Judah said to her, I will take care of you. I will fulfill my obligation in this family. We will make sure that you have an heir. And then somewhere along the way, his life got busy and he forgot his responsibility. He didn't forget. He didn't forget. Number 4, which brings me to the 4th point. Don't neglect your family's responsibilities. Listen to me, fellas, men, in our room, in our church. Be the spiritual leader you're supposed to be. How is to be? Don't compromise anything. Don't compromise your word. Don't compromise your family. Don't compromise your business. Don't compromise your money. Don't compromise your God. Just do what God has called you to do. Period. End of story. Ladies, be the woman of God calls you to be. Don't compromise. Don't neglect responsibilities that you get. Listen to this. 1 Timothy 5:8 says this, but those who will not care for their relatives, especially in their own households, have denied the true faith, and such people are worse than unbelievers. So basically you have, you got saved people, unsaved people, and then people who don't take care of their family. And Paul says you're worse than the unbeliever. Worse. Crazy, right? Let me give you number 5. Okay, this is my favorite point. You ready? All right, so let's review. We have a son who leaves his family and his God, goes to a foreign land, marries a foreign woman, but mainly I'm not talking about like regionally, I'm talking spiritually, okay? Marries a woman who doesn't worship the God that he's supposed to be worshiping. They have 3 sons. 2 of them are already dead. He's got a daughter-in-law who he has neglected. His wife dies. He goes around, sees, she's called a shrine prostitute. You know what she was doing? She was playing the role of what was happening in that culture. In the Canaanite culture, prostitution was part of their religion. So he may have not even worshipped that religion, but he was playing in the fields. And then you have this poor woman who's a Canaanite, has no clue about God or anything, surely can't see it in that family, but yet has come up with an incredible plan, I think, for self-preservation, and says, I have to take matters into my own hands, and I have to con my father-in-law because he won't keep his responsibility or keep his word to me. He would rather just forget about me and throw me to the wolves. You with me so far? So how's your gene pool looking? Pretty good right now, right? All right. So here we go. Number 5. Don't overlook this point. It is still about God's grace. Let me ask you another question real quick, all right? This is what I love. Who is in control of your life? What's his name? God. And you believe that, right? That means you believe every decision you make, no matter what it is, good or bad, God is still involved at the center of your life, yes or no? Yes. Okay, y'all got to get this. Okay, so if you make a mistake, is God still in control? Yes. If you don't make a mistake, is God still in control? Yes. So no matter what you do in your life, is God in control? Yes. Check this out. Nehemiah, not even in Genesis. Go to Nehemiah 11:6. Listen to this. This is Nehemiah. Nehemiah is the man who builds the wall. Nehemiah is the man who God speaks to. Nehemiah is the man who leaves the king, goes back to Jerusalem, says, we're going to build this wall again. We're going to put walls and gates up. We're going to make this happen. This is what Nehemiah says. You ready? Nehemiah 11:6. There were 468 descendants of who? What? Our Puerto Rican brother. There he is. You know he's poor. He got 468 people living there. Probably in the same house. I'm just saying. Dear Lord, please forgive me. But we're real. Okay, here we go. There were 468 descendants of Perez who lived in Jerusalem. All were what? Read it. All were what? Your mistakes do not define your legacy. You don't see it, do you? Listen to me. How in the world does Nehemiah say years later that the household of Perez, whose mother was Tamar, who played the prostitute, all 468 of them were godly men? That story is not in the Bible for no reason. That story is in the Bible to show you in the Old Testament that God is gracious. And your mistakes in your life do not determine your legacy that you leave. 468. You're going, oh my gosh, Jason, this is amazing. It gets even better. You ready? Let me read another verse to you. This is Ruth. Remember we talked about Ruth being also in the genealogy of Jesus? Ruth, chapter 4, verse 12 says this. And may the Lord give you what? Descendants by this young woman who will be like those of our ancestors. Who? Perez, the son of who? And so may your descendants, before you judge people's mistakes, you better back up and realize God is in control. Before you judge somebody else and what they do and how they look, they may have prostituted their souls. Listen to me. But you better back up and realize that God is still in control. You may have a child who's wayward, who's not in church, who doesn't follow the ways of the Lord, but you better back up and realize God is in control. Amen. You may realize that, hey, that person that I married, should I be married to that person? Should I not be? Listen, you need to step up and realize that God is in control. Amen. Your mistakes do not define your legacy. Church, listen to me. Your mistakes do not define your legacy. Is that powerful? Amen. Okay. I don't know if I should say this last thing. Okay, so, all right, so you got Perez, and that's obviously the Israel's king, right? That's the lineage. Okay, so check this out. You sitting down? Okay. So, the other son, the other twin, and let me just say this to you real quickly, how God redeems what the world takes from you. How many sons does she have? How many husbands did she sleep with that died? She was only guaranteed one, and God said, I'm gonna redeem back to what you lost. You had two jerks of a husband. You have twin boys. Whatever was taken from you, I will give it back to you. Listen to me. God not only gives you back what you lost, He takes note and says, I'm gonna bless you doubly. I'm gonna just pour my blessing out. You got twin boys. And not only are the boys going to be good boys, they're going to have great descendants. And they're going to be my boys who will worship me, who 468 of them will show up with Nehemiah and help rebuild a wall and fight. So the other boy, let's talk about him real quick. Now, I can't put a lot of, this is just, I don't want to say speculation. It's different. But the other boy, Zira, he had descendants. He had 4 sons that are listed. And actually, his 4 sons are listed when it talks about Solomon being so wise. It actually names the 4 sons that Zara has. One of those sons actually goes up, and it shows that Tamar goes to Egypt with Joseph. And then somewhere along the way, this son leaves Egypt and starts his own part of the world. So he settles, check this out. So he settles in a city in the Greek culture called Troy. You know, the Helen of Troy, the face that launched, 1,000 ships, right? You know, the mythological story. Well, if you go back and read mythology, that the city of Troy was founded by one of the sons of Zeus. We know that his father traced all the way back, his name was Zara, so they think Zeus and Zara actually kind of sound similar. Catching it yet? Very blow your mind. You ready for this one? So then after Troy falls, years later, after they have kings and princes and all this kind of stuff, the royal family of Troy ends up leaving, and they actually just leave town. They go start another city. You ready for this city's name? London. I'm not done yet. You ready? Part of this whole time frame is that there was also, from London, they also established Ireland, which used to be called Ulster. The flag of Ulster, you ready for this, is a red hand. The scarlet thread that was tied around the hand of Zara also shows up in the early history of Ireland. I'm getting ready to blow your mind even more. At that time frame-wise, you have Ireland being established as a kingdom. You also have Israel being established as a kingdom, and King David is on the throne. And somewhere along the way, between as they have all this stuff, there's a point in time where actually the royalty of Perez's family and the royalty of over here in Ireland, this family, they actually have sons and daughters that actually marry. So when the king falls in Israel and Babylon comes in and does captivity, the same family line still has a kingship over in Ireland, in England, Great Britain. So when God says to David, your descendants will always sit on the throne forever and ever, there's never been a time when this family has not sat on the throne in royalty. And if you go to Windsor Castle, listen, if you go to Windsor Castle, there's a piece of paper that Queen Elizabeth has where it takes her at the bottom and it gives all the kings, and it shows all the way back to those 2 twins. I thought to myself, your past mistakes never dictate your legacy. It's crazy stuff, right? I thought to myself, how many times are we in the thick of life and we think that we've made too many mistakes and God can't correct it? There's not a mistake you can make that God can't say, I am in charge. Will you bow your heads with me? you're here today and you're just struggling, I want to tell you, and I hope you see this in this message, that God is crazy about you, that God pays pain, that God knows what he's doing, that you can trust him. That there wasn't a moment that went by that God didn't think about Tamar. He gave her the greatest honor ever. He said, I'm going to put you in my lineage. Wow. And he says to us today, your past mistakes do not define your legacy. Don't let Satan tell you that you've made too many mistakes for God to bless you. Don't let Satan tell you that the mistakes that you made negate everything that God has for you. God is sovereign. God is in control. He calls us to be obedient to himself. Father, I pray that you give us hope. I pray that we understand that you love us and that you care for us. And if there's anybody here today that has never accepted you as their Lord and Savior, that they would just surrender today in this moment. They would just God, I give you my heart. I give you everything. I just believe in you. It's not what we do, it's what you did. So God, speak to us. Speak to our hearts. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. Would you stand with me as we worship together?